What we're going to talk about is the relationship between what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico since the BP spill, the prospect of BP and Shell drilling in the Arctic, what's happening right now in Texas that Alice is very involved with, what's happening in New York State with the Algonquin pipeline and the nuclear facility there, Indian Point. And we're going to talk about both the danger and the hope. The BP spill happened a few years ago. There were a number of statements to the effect that nature would just take care of it all and everything would be fine. And what we know is that the Gulf of Mexico has not substantially recovered. There are huge repercussions for animal life, for water quality, for human lifestyles, people who depended on the fisheries there. And now they're talking about drilling in the Arctic. So this is part of what seems to be a very aggressive global policy of extracting fossil fuels regardless of any other alternatives and regardless of the impacts on people. So, Alice, why don't you tell us what's going on in Big Bend, Texas?
Sure. About a year or so ago, we started to see rumblings that a pipeline was going to be planned to connect from a pipeline hub in Fort Stockton, Texas, to Mexico. We weren't sure of the route, but we were concerned that we weren't sure if fracking would come first or the pipeline would come first, but it became pretty clear that the pipeline was going to be coming first. So we decided to get as much information as we could, and within months, local landowners started to receive letters saying that this pipeline was coming. It's going to be 42 inches in diameter, which is bigger than the Keystone XL pipeline. It's going to be running through some of the remotest and most untouched bioregion in the entire country. It's being classified as an intrastate pipeline, which means that it's just supposed to be inside Texas, but it's going to be hooking up with a pipeline coming up from Mexico. It is an international pipeline, but they're classifying it as an intrastate pipeline in order to avoid the federal oversight that would require. In other words, inside the state of Texas, there's hardly any environmental regulations. So the Railroad Commission is in charge of that. They're bought and paid for by the oil industry. So basically, anybody who wants to put in a pipeline can just tell them, I'm putting in a pipeline, and there's really no regulations. You don't have to get the environmental agencies to come in and do any sort of test. So they're trying to get this in very fast. Their strategy seems to be to put the pipeline in and then pay any fines if they're in violation of any codes. They're going to pay the fees later. So we know for a fact that this is an international pipeline. It's not designed to serve any customers in the United States. It's designed to power about 30 power stations, new power stations that they're building in Mexico. So right now, we're trying to our group is challenging this in numerous ways, but one of the ways is we need to challenge this idea that it's a public utility. This isn't a public utility. If they were classified as a public utility, which is what they're going for, then they can condemn land in their way. They can take landowners' land by eminent domain. We've got a block of landowners that are going to be trying to challenge this classification. We've got all kinds of other residents who they don't have land in the way, but they don't want to live near a pipeline or near fracking, who are also fighting it in different ways. So we've got a multi-pronged approach going on right now, and the thing is supposed to be up and running by 2017, so we have very little time to stop this process.
I want to address two things specifically about Big Bend. One is the distinction between a public utility and a public good. Can you clarify that, because this goes to eminent domain? And the other thing is the news I got on NPR this morning that the governors decided that the rights of frackers trump anybody else's rights, and anybody who doesn't like it ought to just buy a horse.
This idea that it's the public good seems to be a new concept in capitalism, that the public good is anything that is extremely profitable. Right now, the Texas legislature has decided that what they're calling anything that is, quote, commercially reasonable is in all of our best interests. So there's this idea that the public good is somehow related to profit for a very small number of people. And this is something that we definitely want to challenge. I think this needs to be challenged on a national level. Like, what is the public good? Is the public good to make a billionaire? The people who own the pipeline, this particular pipeline, the Trans-Pecos pipeline, it's two people, a Mexican billionaire named Carlos Slim and an American billionaire named Kelsey Warren. These people are billionaires, and the money is all going into their pockets. It's not here to serve anyone in the United States. It's going to destroy health and landscape and lives. They're just plowing their way through for the profit of a few. And I think that people here in Texas, there's no one that I have spoken to on any side of the political spectrum who thinks that this HB 40, the ruling that just came down yesterday and was signed by the insane governor, to take local rule away from communities. As you probably know, the city of Denton banned fracking inside their city limits by a wide margin. This was voted on by people from all parts of the political spectrum. It wasn't just what they call environmentalists, and everyone voted against having fracking inside the city limits, and the state of Texas decided this was unacceptable, that people shouldn't be able to decide what's best for them. And they passed this ruling as a punishment, basically. It will be fought, and it will be hopefully overturned, because people are going to file lawsuits immediately. There's no city that in the state of Texas. Texas is all about local control and, supposedly small government. So there's going to be a lot of outrage about this, hopefully in the coming weeks.
Just out of curiosity, as a sideline, because there's certainly a lot of corruption in Mexico. There's been a lot of past talk about connections between drug cartels and politicians there. Is anybody paying attention to the possibility that this could be drug money that's pushing fracking and pipelines in Texas?
I think it's very hard to separate drug money from political money. It's kind of like separating oil industry money from, a whole bunch of things happened. One of the reasons why fracking didn't happen sooner in northern Mexico is because of the drug cartels having control over that land. In 2014, in the beginning of 2014, or late 2013, December, I think, Mexico denationalized its oil industry. Obama then went down to Mexico, and within weeks, the drug lord El Chapo was captured, and then all of a sudden, northern Mexico was okay to frack. It was okay. There's definitely relationship between, what's going on with the cartels and who's in control, but I think in Mexico, it's very difficult to know who's actually in control.
The worst case scenario is that Texas is handing the American government over to drug cartels?
I think that's already happening. There's already huge relationship between the United States and Mexico. We're supplying them with guns, and I don't think that you can. I think that's already very much happening. I don't know how this would really make a difference. It's like a global economy of oil and drugs. To me, it's like one and the same thing. We're being run by the oil company or the drug cartels. It's the same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of talk about the relationship between Middle Eastern terrorism and drug trades and oil. That's nothing new, sadly. So I want to talk about a couple more things. Just briefly, I want to touch on this idea that we're experiencing a global takeover of the environment with means that are intensely fraudulent and that contest what any civilized country has ever conceived of as the public good. Jean, I'd love to hear your comments about how things are going in the Gulf of Mexico, because and why don't you just briefly explain what your relationship is to what's happening with the BP spill and monitoring things in the Gulf of Mexico.
We have a multi-million-dollar grant for 3 years from GOMRI, which is the Gulf of Mexico Marine Institute, which is funded by BP Oil in isolation. So it has its own board. The money is irrevocably in the trust fund. We have no oversight except to, we have to get the money. We have to write competitive grants. So we have the only large marsh grant, although there are some other smaller ones, meaning $1 million over 3 years. Ours is 13 over 3 years. So we have some long-term data, and we've been looking at the effects of the oil in the marsh. So is that it?
Yeah, that's fine. So you said that you're beginning to see a slight improvement. How many years has it been since the spill, and what kinds of long-term damage are you seeing despite the little bit of promise?
Well, I can't say all things, but for one, the oil definitely increased the erosion rate, which is already high. But the erosion rate is going back towards baseline, which still means it's losing land. We can't say more than that because the images, for example, don't show up every second. They come there a year or two late. But anyhow, it's increased the land loss. It's now back to where it was, but where it was kind of high. And the permitting by the state probably is causing that. And the permitting by the state is about equal to the highest extra amount from the BP oil spill. So it's eroding at the edge faster, but that erosion was happening anyhow, and it's about equal to that, but now it's declined. The state permitting, however, is continuing. So there's a dramatic effect to the oil, and there's a chronic effect by the state, and other factors as well. But by the state, I mean they permit dredging for oil and gas and other things, but mostly oil and gas. Anyhow, they've been doing that every year since 1930, One of the other effects is that the oil itself, which seems to be dissipating, has an effect on the insects and the birds in the marsh that use the marsh. So, let's see what else. Well, those would be kind of the main things right now. There is some difference in oil sites compared to other oil sites offshore. Well, the oiling over time, it looks like the phytoplankton offshore has been changed because of the oiling, and we're looking to find out if that's the same thing inshore. But I'm talking like a 20-year or 30-year period from more than the BP spill. We have we have a year, two and a half. Well, we're in the middle of the first of 3 years, and we hope to expand, go for another 3 years. But that's later. That's a quick.
So let me just quickly explain for anybody who's come on and may have had trouble following the implications of what Gene was talking about. What he's talking about is the disruption of the food chain and those cycles that allow fish and whales and humans to survive off an ecosystem. And one of the reasons this is so important is because the Mississippi water basin, which drains into the Gulf of Mexico is the third largest watershed in the entire world. So it's an incredibly important ecosystem for the survival of the entire planet. The fact that we've compromised it to the extent we've compromised it is extremely alarming. And the idea that we're now going to move into the Arctic and compromise that system is a little bit off the spectrum. So let me move briefly to what's going on in New York and to the project concept that I've been working on and how it might segue into this notion of how science, art, and activism might get together to oppose these kinds of trends. So the Algonquin pipeline is just another pipeline for natural gas. The only caveat is that it's going to be within about, I think, 115 or 150 feet of the Indian Point nuclear facility. If something should go wrong, and we know by Murphy's Law that the chances are eventually something will go wrong, and that natural gas comes in contact with that nuclear facility, we will have a Fukushima that includes the entire east coast of North America. That includes New York City, it includes Washington, D.C., it includes Boston. Anyway, needless to say, that's a very, very scary prospect. So I've developed this project, and the project concept is very simple. I want to contest the taking of eminent domain with copyright law. And the reason that copyright law is actually an interesting way to contest eminent domain is because all the software companies in the world are very invested in copyright. That's how they basically make their money. So even the TPP, if that should go through, would actually strengthen copyright law. So the idea is to pit one form of the legal system against another form of the legal system. And the way we want to do that is to create some ecological art in the pathways of pipelines, proposed pipelines, and proposed fracking that would then be copyrighted and wend itself through the courts if we have notification to stop those companies from going forward, because they would have to address copyright. If this is addressed on a continental level by including people from Mexico, for example, then it's not a localized fight, and I think this is how they've been winning so far. They've been fighting by, it's just Indian Point, it's just Big Bend, it's just whatever, New Orleans. If we start showing the public that this is a continental plan that affects everybody, and we can get it into the system as a stone in their path, we might have enough time to educate the public about how dire this present situation is. So that, in a nutshell, is the concept. And, Gene, we've just lost you. Let me see if I can get me back.
Got the voice, though. I'll get back.
Okay. So let's work backwards. Gene, I'd love to have you comment about that. We're hoping to have a launch on June 21st with the first stage of this project, and then let's go to Alice. And what I want to talk about is this relationship between art, science, and activism.
This is ambitious. I hope it works. I don't know one way or the other. It's really, it's an interesting social intervention, and it depends whether, I don't know what it depends on. I'm trying to get it up, though.
Yeah, me too. I'm trying to get my video back. In the meantime, Alice, would you like to comment on this? Because I know you've met some skepticism about whether this could work in Big Bend.
Well, it's not necessarily skepticism. I mean, many people here are aware of the piece that the guy in Canada did, Tiersen. Tiesenhausen, yeah. And of course, you know, we have Marfa here, and so we have Donald Judd's work, which is already in the landscape and already in the way. We also have a phenomenon here called the Marfa Lights, which are it's a tourist thing where we have this viewing station that looks out into the desert, and there are these mystery lights that have been happening for, you know, there's a record of them happening for over 100 years. These strange lights in the landscape. We also have McDonald Observatory, which is one of the biggest observatories in the country because we're in one of the darkest places in the country. So I think that people here feel like we have things already in place that that are similar in that way. I mean, when we want to stop this stuff because part of our life is what already is here in the landscape. It has to do with tourist dollars. I mean, we can quantify it in that way. So I think that people here are definitely interested in this idea of different ways that we can get in the way. I just don't know that the copyright thing would necessarily work here. I mean, I realize it takes a lot of funding. We're sort of doing this on a shoestring, and like I said, we have a lot of artists who have different ideas about how we can block them.
There are two parts to my answer to your comments. One is the shoestring issue. Mm-hmm. I think that the copyright is not going to cost us anything because Patrick Riley is going to do that. He's doing it pro bono. Where we're going to start getting into money is once we file notification to the companies, and I believe we have a few months before we have to do that, and then if it starts the process of going through the court system. Mm-hmm. My thought strategically was that we would launch the overture to the project, get some visuals and some other material together so that I can start a Kickstarter campaign and then start putting the funding together that would go towards the beginning, the notification. But really what I would like to see is that it no longer is my project at some point, it's everybody's project, that if you want to value art, if you want to value nature, you can't allow corporations to define eminent domain, which is what's been happening. And I don't remember the other point. But, Jean, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this relationship between science and activism. I know you're very much the scientist, but you've been working as an artist in training with me, I think, now for several years, and you certainly have your own background in music and art. So I'd like to hear what you think, and you certainly have the mindset of an activist. And this image that we're looking at right now is some of the test shots of the work that we did in Woodstock, New York, as we started creating the images that would go on the trees. So the artwork for this project, Blued Trees, could not be destroyed by cutting down the trees because that would contest copyright. That's the basic concept. So, Jean, to you, and then back to Alice.
Well, I'll be frank. I mean, my first priority is the science, and I'm not a fracking expert. I understand that plumbing, you might call it, for oil dispersal is going through this project or not, and I'm not going to be right now. I mean, I'm not planning on being involved except to be part of the painting of the trees and talking about it. But I mean, my science is going to have to come first.
Well, let me put it to you differently then. I'm not asking you to downgrade your science at all, but I am curious about something that's come up a number of times when we've done these webcasts, and it comes up periodically in the sciences, which is when a scientist holds strong opinions, as I know you do, where is the line where you start supporting activism because your convictions are so powerful that you can no longer ignore it?
I guess it's a matter of efficacy, of efficiency. Well, I'm not sure efficiency, but what I can do with my time. So
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Gene. If you want to defer, you can defer.
I'm trying to get to the question, but I can't. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm being asked in a little bit, because I think we got a problem with the planet, and I think fracking is just a piece of it. But it has. I'm sure it can be stopped, actually. The problems leading to climate change.
Does that mean you feel pessimistic about halting this?
I guess it might seem like that, but I don't really. I just have to do something. So the thing I'm doing is science, and I hope I'm working at it. I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I'm not sure it's not going to be enough. Humans are pretty stupid about this, frankly. I mean, you do a lot of things in which you're doing as an artist that you don't know how they're going to turn out. I've got 40 years experience and I guess I'm trying to, as a scientist in this region, and I'm trying to make use of my time I have left. I don't know whether it's going to end tomorrow or 20 years from now. But I know my strength is the science right now, at least, because I've got stuff built up that I'm trying to get out. I'm being a little obtuse, I guess. But, and this is just a way I can help somebody else.
Right.
Everybody else, I mean, on this.
So, Alice, what are your thoughts about this relationship between art and activism and science in terms of creating a collaborative strategy that opposes this kind of behavior or experience?
Well, my own background is I was a research assistant in marine biology. My degree is in marine biology, and I worked on the GLOBEC project, Global Ocean Ecosystem Ecology Project, as a seagoing oceanographic research assistant for about 8 years in the North Atlantic. And during that time, which was in the late 90s, we could clearly see that the numbers of, the counts of larval fish and phytoplankton and zooplankton. My specialty was zooplankton. I was a copepod specialist. But we could clearly see that what was going on, that things were changing not for the better. And I was actively discouraged from communicating about this, because it really wasn't the job of the scientists to sound the alarm bells. It was only our job to collect the data and publish the data. I felt that now, during this time, I was going to Rhode Island School of Design at night for scientific illustration, because I felt that I wanted to be able to communicate well about science, but I wanted to be a scientist first. So at the same time that I was sort of being discouraged from communicating about the dire appearance of our data, I was making illustrations that were becoming what I felt were less and less scientific and more about our general situation and our ways of thinking and how we got into the predicament that we're in. And so for me, I actually felt like I wasn't able to be as effective while being a scientist as I am able to be as a communicator. I feel like there's a complete lack in our society of people whose job it is to be a good scientist and also communicate well with a great understanding of science, communicate well what's going on. We need a lot more people who are able to communicate clearly what's going on. There's a lot of people who are journalists or, work in the media. I mean, even National Geographic is funded by Monsanto and whatever. I mean, we need unbiased people who are able to work in science and communicate effectively about what's happening. I think that's the problem. It's been a failure on the part of our society that we haven't had communicators sounding these alarm bells for a lot longer. So I appreciate, Gene, that you're able to straddle these worlds and be a scientist and at the same time communicate the dire state that we're in. As far as how art can be effective, I mean, my personal way of doing it is just trying to illuminate the kind of absurdity of our thinking, that this idea, I mean, the things that have come up down here in the Big Bend, I mean, we have several very poor communities that are, some of the poorest in the state of Texas, claiming that this pipeline is going to bring jobs or bring cheap energy. I mean, this idea that the choice is cheap energy and jobs that destroy the planet or nothing or poverty is completely ridiculous. I mean, we need to educate people to let them know that these aren't the only two choices. There are many other choices. We can bring agriculture back here. We can have solar. What if billions of dollars were being invested in renewables? I mean, then we would have plenty of jobs. We wouldn't be destroying the planet. We would have free sources of energy for all eternity. But these options are not in the public consciousness. So I feel like my own angle is to work on the socially imaginary and try to help people understand that there's way more choices than we've been given, than we are fed. So I think here on the border, I mean, we're under immediate duress. I mean, the construction has already begun in the town where I live, and people of all parts of the stratosphere, old ladies, kids, students, border patrol, everybody is standing at the site with signs that say no pipeline. I mean, I'm just amazed at how all parts of the community are coming together immediately around this. I mean, we don't have a lot of time to, I feel, to go through a legal process. We definitely have time to make art in the way of the pipeline and get publicity for that. And I feel like that can have a lot of power, and we do need to concentrate on things like that, things that are visually striking that the media can pick up and share widely to let people know that, this is what's happening here. I've been in touch with people from all different anti-pipeline groups across the country, and I mean, I think we all feel a little bit similarly that together we're a huge voice. I mean, there's only 18,000 of us who live in the Big Bend. That's the size of the state of Maryland that has 6 million people. But we got an article in Al Jazeera last week. We had an article in Mother Jones.
Great article, too.
Article in Truth Out. And, I mean, we're getting a lot of international press. And I feel like that's perhaps for us the most effective way to get attention and form alliances, is to just make our plight known.
I just want to talk about the making art part.
Yeah.
And I want to divide my comments in two. One is the idea of art as communication and interpretation, which is the traditional way that art has functioned. But the area that interests me most is how we can create different systems models. I don't think these two things are in opposition whatsoever, but that's why I've taken on the idea of pitting one part of the legal system against another part of the legal system. To me, that's a performative exercise, and I don't think, perhaps this is where there's been a misunderstanding, I don't think that we have to get it to the Supreme Court in order to make this effective. As Jim White pointed out in an earlier webcast that we did, if we take the model of the Endangered Species Act, the goal is really to just delay things. If we can put art in the way, whatever kind of art, if we can insist, and this is the legal issue with the Visual Artists' Rights Act, if we can show that the art cannot be moved, because in the past, site-specific art has been dismissed as, oh, well, we could really move it and it would be the same someplace else. If we can make the legal case that cannot be moved, then we've got something in the way. And that part doesn't require a lot of money and doesn't require a lot of time. It just requires us to start making the work. And if we can...
Why is art more valuable than the trees themselves? I mean, why shouldn't we let...
It's not more valuable. It's just a legal device. It definitely is not more important. In fact, the whole point of this particular project is that it's art with the trees. Mm-hmm. It's not just art on the trees, it's with the trees. And that's why there's a musical element to this whole project, where the sound of the trees, the sound of the landscape is just as important as any visuals that might come out. If anything, the forest, the trees, the ecosystem are the stars of the project. The goal of painting the trees, if anything, is to draw attention to the landscape. But since it is art, from a legal point of view, it does set up this challenge between copyright and eminent domain and the definition of public good. Ultimately, the public good is absolutely the trees. It's absolutely the water.
Well, I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I guess I don't have the same trust in the legal system that you do. I mean, I just have zero patience for getting involved in legal stuff. Like, I just feel like we need to just get on the ground and help people feel connected to the place. And that's the thing about the Big Bend that, you know, you probably experience up there too. But here, people are so connected to place. Like, they feel this place is so beautiful, and people live here because they choose to live here, not because they want to make a lot of money. I mean, nobody here in the Big Bend, there's not a lot of industry, people are living here by choice because they're in love with the place. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize is people's connection to place, and give people a means to express that sense of passion and heartfelt connection that they have to place. But I have no patience with like the legalities of anything. I just want to get on the ground and do stuff.
I get it. But I don't think that these things are in contradiction with each other. I think that there are many ways to skin a cat here. I hate to use that metaphor because of my cat, but if we can approach this from a number of different angles, whether it's doing the actions you're doing in Big Bend, whether it's my actions to pull together people from around the continent, or Gene's actions with science, we have to go at it from as many different points of view as possible. What I would hope is that we can find ways to work together and support each other.
Yes,
so,
I think.
I want you to either make music or paint something on June 21st, Alice.
Give me the nuts and bolts. So that's what you want to happen is on June 21st, you want to have actions going on in a bunch of different places?
Correct. And I just want a document from each location, who did what. Then that all goes into one file for copyright filing that Patrick does. And then the rest is my task to get the media interested and to make the connections between these locations. That Big Bend is fighting the same fight that Indian Point people are fighting. It's fighting the same thing that they're fighting in Mexico, that they're fighting in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And I think if we all move together as one, so it's not this fight in this location and that fight in that location, we have a better chance of educating the whole public.
Mm-hmm. So what would it actually look like? I mean, what would be ideal for us to do here in the Big Bend to connect ourselves with what you're doing?
To paint something that's going to be in the way of the pipeline, and if you want to, make music there. And I think you've gotten the instructions of the options of how that could be done so it's not random. Mm-hmm. And if you want to play around with that and do something that's based on the idea and then takes off in your own interpretive way, that's fine too. The only thing that's been consistent has been the color of ultramarine blue and the idea that it's on something that can't be moved without destroying the landscape and the art simultaneously.
Okay. That's, as you know, that's more of a challenge here because we have no trees. We have very few trees in the way. But I will walk the route and I'll see what we can possibly do.
You know what? Just walking the route and taking photographs as you photograph the route, that in itself might be an interpretation and really interesting. The measure that I designed that people can use for music or for the spacing of things that are painted, if you could go through a third of a mile and just stop at the points in terms of the rhythm of that measure and take a photograph at those points, as far as I'm concerned, that's a tremendous contribution. It would be really interesting and probably really beautiful.
Okay. Odds are that I would be trespassing. Part of the route that I can get to easily is along the railroad tracks, which has, there's an easement there, but it's not really meant for the public. I mean, that's where I would try to do this. And there are some
to break the law for me.
Well, that's the thing. Is like I'm going to be breaking the law to make a point about the law.
Half a dozen of another in terms of what law you're going to break in order to get justice.
Okay, I'll give this some thought, definitely. And it's possible I could get permission to go on some. I don't know personally any of the landowners yet, but I may be able to form a connection.
That would be great. That would be great. Because the whole goal, as I said, is to make these connections, connect the dots about where this is happening.
Okay.
And how huge it is. I mean, what's huge is what's being done to this planet and specifically to this continent.
So where do you get your ultramarine blue pigment?
You got the PDF that I sent, right?
Yeah, okay.
That tells you where you can get the ultramarine blue, but if you have any trouble, just let me know.
Okay, the other problem, as I said before, is that the pipeline company has been hiring surveyors who have been painting things along the route. And so one of our concerns about this particular project is that it would be confusing for people, that they might think it's the mark of a surveyor. And
right.
People
that's a big problem. I have to think about that to see if I can come up with any suggestions. Could you just X out their marks with blue?
It's illegal.
It's illegal?
It could be illegal, and you have to make a decision about whether you want to do like the Vietnam War guerrilla actions. But
right.
I wouldn't recommend that without some thought.
I don't want to get anyone in trouble.
Yeah. All right, we'll give this some thought.
Yeah.
Could it be done in a place where there wasn't paint from the surveyors?
Well, it could be done in a place where there's not paint, but the thing is that people have been sharing these photographs of actually prickly pear cactuses that have been spray painted by overspray. They come along with this hot pink spray paint, and they spray anything in the path. And so people have been outraged already that the pipeline company is coming in here and, destroying our flora with spray paint. So that was one of the concerns that, the small group of us that met to talk about this project were like, well, how are people going to know that this isn't the surveyors doing more damage or creating more harm than good?
Well, let me give that some thought.
But also, you've thought it out, and you've got the right paint, and it doesn't last long, and it's not permanent, and so forth.
Right.
Well, I wonder whether one part that would be useful is just take some pictures of those saguaros and with Photoshop just paint a big blue X over the image of the cactus.
They shouldn't be spraying this cactus.
Alice, if you send me one of those images, I can try and do that in Photoshop and see whether it has any value.
Well, a blue X over the cactus, it would look like, would that be to try to indicate that this is what's going to be destroyed? Because it would look like we're trying to do that. I mean, I was imagining a whole, like, a cactus painted blue, but like I said, I think if we add color to the landscape that's already so beautiful, I mean, right now, the prickly pear cactuses are in bloom. They're this deep orange color. They're stunning. Like, they're doing their thing, and they don't need any help from us. I mean, they're just fabulous. I mean, maybe I could send you some pictures of that. I mean,
please. So if you could send me pictures of some of the painted cacti and some of them in bloom, and let me see if I can come up with anything that's useful.
Okay. I can do that.
Okay. Good.
So I don't have a model
Go ahead,
for this.
Gene.
We don't have a model for this type of activity, except a generic one may be, again, the Vietnam War, but we don't know what's going to work or won't work. And I think from the viewpoint of trying to have a saner world, we have to try a variety of things that have never been here before at all. I mean, this is a planetary experiment here. It may not work out well for us.
Right.
So.
Right. There's a quote from Kim Stanley Robinson that's in my dissertation. I think it's from his book, 50 Degrees Below Zero, and it goes something like, it's from a conversation between two scientists. And one of them says, so what we're talking about is terraforming the Earth. And the other scientist says, we're already terraforming it, it's just that we don't know how.
We don't have the details, right?
Right.
I think, well, we have some cachet to analyze the forensics, but the forensics itself are not by itself enough at all, because the world is not rational.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some value to both the science and the art in this, but the art needs the science, and the science could exist without the art, but not for long.
No, we need each other. We all need each other.
Yeah.
So I would love to have an opinion from you guys about something that's just strategic in terms of what I'm doing, which is the launch date is June 21st. I'm trying to decide how much information I should release before June 21st. I'd kind of like to get the word out and get people thinking about these things before the launch so that as many people as possible could participate. The activists that had originally brought me in on this kept warning that if we let people know what we're up to, the gas companies will just pounce on us. But I don't think at this point we're doing anything that they're going to see as alarming.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think about timing?
Yeah, I don't think that they'll find it alarming. I think, and also, how will they know where you're going to do it? I mean, you don't have to announce the location.
Good point. Good point. Really good point. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I might release this conversation as part of that process. How do you guys feel about that?
Sure.
I don't care.
Okay. All right. So onwards.
Sure.
We've got quite the fight of our life on our hands, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Can the actions take place before June 21st? Can I take these pictures for you before? Okay.
Yeah.
Because actually on June 21st, I just met with a local Indian chief. We have the Texas Apache tribe is here, and Texas doesn't recognize Native American tribes at all. We have no reservations in Texas.
Done?
It's incredible. But I met with the chief yesterday from a local tribe, and he's planning on facilitating a ceremony for us on the 21st of June.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. So we'll announce that. When I launch, if you get me the information, I'll include that in the launch information.
Okay.
And maybe they have some ideas about this whole business of painting or not painting, or what should be painted or not painted.
Yeah. Okay.
Gene, do you want to have the last word on any of this?
That was it. You're saying, Elise, there's no recognized tribe in Texas?
Not a one. Nope.
That's incredible.
It is. It's lunacy.
There's a lot to all of this that's pretty incredible and lunacy.
But we're hoping, again, like, yesterday we had this meeting with the chief, and we realized that we're all coming together. I mean, we can help raise awareness of their tribe. I shared his comments on our Facebook page, which is Not in Our Big Bend, and it got tons of shares. I mean, people are amazed to know that we have an Indian chief locally, and that they are doing wild crafting and gathering of herbs, and he has an herbalism practice. And I mean, people just don't even know this. So I think it's time. I mean, people are ready to embrace these old ways because they realize that it's our only hope. So we're hoping to be able to give this guy and his people a platform for their voice, and he's hoping to teach us, bring our community together and teach us how to listen to the earth better.
That's wonderful. And maybe we will all get a bunch of horses.
Yep.
Are invasive.
Well, Alice, I'm very grateful that you could join us. Gene, I'm very grateful that you could make time. I know that you are always really, really incredibly busy. You're always very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. There's lots for everyone to think about from this conversation.
Nice to meet you, Gene.
Nice
Thanks,
to meet you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
You
Bye.
too.